You're listening to Sustainably Geeky, the podcast for everyday environmentalists.
Hello to Sustainably Geeky, episode 8. I think we're on episode 8 now. We've been doing this for a while, and we're really excited to come to you today and talk about food production. I'm joined by Jen and Chris.
Hello.
And Stefan is not joining us today, but we hope to have him back next week. We're just going to jump on in and, like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about food production, the consequences of that activity, and ways that we can kind of, impact or lessen the impact of that. So with that, does anyone have anything they would like to start with?
I'll start.
Okay.
The new Canada Food Guide came out. It hadn't been updated since 2007. So what makes this food guide different from previous ones is that this was solely put together by scientists. There were no lobbyist groups involved, no businesses, nothing like that with agendas. It was just pure fact, science-based food guide. And so the big difference is that portion size went out the window, because really, like when somebody says a serving or a portion size, you don't go around carrying measuring cups and weights and stuff like that to actually know what that is. So that's gone. The number of servings is gone. And the biggest thing is they've divided up the plate. So it's a big plate. So half it's covered in fruits and veggies. The quarter of it is grains. And then the big difference is the protein portion. So mixed in, the regular meat, the meat part's gotten a lot smaller, and instead it's got lentils and beans and tofu and other plant-based sources of protein. And then instead of recommending milk or juice as a beverage, it just recommends water.
Nice. I like it.
Yeah. So it's been the biggest difference is that, dairy's not considered, a daily thing you should consume, and processed meats are out and things like that. So it's a little bit more
natural,
straightforward with what you're supposed to be. Well, because before, processed meats would count as a serving of protein, right? Whereas this is saying none of that. You can have plant-based protein, eggs every once in a while, a little bit of chicken, a little bit of red meat, but less processed food for your protein, which is good. Yeah, so they've completely cut out the dairy category.
So your food pyramid has shifted a little in Canada.
It's a big plate.
We grew up with here.
Yeah, well, I grew up with that one too, right? The pyramid with the food groups and everything like that. But like dairy being a complete food group on its own, and this time it's just a big plate with cross sections all cut out and stuff.
Yeah, you are hearing more and more about how dairy is not actually, like, our bodies aren't made to actually consume it and digest it, and that's why lactose intolerance is so prevalent in humans, because we're not actually supposed to eat it or drink it.
Yeah, my son's lactose intolerant, and it's a big deal around this house when he's had some.
Yeah, my husband has that same problem.
They contribute to the greenhouse gas emissions that we're going to talk about later.
It is interesting, though, how certain cultures have it worse than others. It's almost like if you're not raised drinking milk all the time, and then suddenly you become an adult and you think you can all of a sudden start drinking milk, it's like not the case. But I thought it was interesting. I read an article about how milk or dairy products in general cause an inflammatory response in your body. Like, you have this reaction that occurs similar to an injury. So your body responds by creating antibodies to try to heal itself, which causes inflammation in your body when you're eating dairy products, similar to when you have an injury. So there's a lot of things like that. It's sugar, a lot of grains. Everybody talks about eating clean, and it's a lot of those elimination diets kind of try to pull out dairy and grains and sugar and those types of things because your body creates inflammation trying to like process it.
Everything that I love is bad, basically.
Right?
I watched a YouTube video. She's this wonderful, beautiful vegan, and they had this pizza party, and it was the saddest pizza ever. And I'm like, if Jen saw this, she'd just shake her head because they made it out of potatoes.
JP Sears did a video on a vegan pizza, and it was like made of chopped up cucumbers, the dough, and then the toppings, the cheese were more cucumbers, but they were all chopped.
It's like that Simpsons episode. Yeah, where Homer goes on a diet and the dietitian's like, just substitute this for bell pepper. If you want this, bell pepper. So everything was substituted for a bell pepper. You thirsty? Drink a bell pepper.
Ugh. Juice of bell pepper. Yeah.
Juice of bell pepper.
Yeah, it's also interesting to me that there's such a stigma to drinking like human milk after you're a baby, right? But that's actually what our bodies were made to consume. We're going back to the dairy thing. So not saying that I want to drink that at all, because I'm totally on that sport, that ship of I'm not drinking that. But if you think about it, that's probably what we should be drinking as humans. So
yeah,
anyways.
Milk is for baby cows, not for humans.
Yes, definitely. Awesome. Well, that's pretty cool that Canada is using science and fact-based reasoning to.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
those
types of researchers, they need money, they need funding to do all that sort of research, and lobbyist groups and businesses are eager to get their stamp on things, and they'll fund it. So this time around, that wasn't the case. So it looks completely different than the one that I grew up with.
Cool.
Which is great.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I can jump in and kind of talk about some of the. So I guess, first of all, if we take a step back and look at the way that we produce our food, humans are so disengaged from the process now. Mostly, we don't really see where our food comes from, or if we go to the store and buy it, it looks completely different than it does before it gets to us. So a lot of people are very desensitized, I guess, to what actually goes into that process. And there's a big movement now to grow your own food, and if you are going to eat meat that was raised more responsibly and ethically, and that the animals were treated well. And I think that's all great, but we still have to understand that everything we do has an impact. And I guess the only way not to have that impact as humans is not to eat, but that's not an option. So here we are. But just kind of taking a look at some of the consequences of our current food production system. So I was researching the big one that everyone thinks of, which is greenhouse gases. And, there's really three big ones that are associated with food production, which is carbon dioxide or CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide or NOx, which all are varying degrees of abundant and potent. So I think carbon dioxide kind of gets the biggest rap, but because there's so much of it. But methane and nitrous oxide are actually more, damaging to the environment or to the atmosphere over the long run. And I think a lot of times we kind of forget that, or only focus on the one, when it's really, there's a lot more to the picture. But just to kind of throw out some stats, and I don't want to make this like number heavy, but CO2, this is all from the EPA website, and it was all updated as of like 2016. So, the numbers are always a little behind, but 82% of greenhouse gases from human activity in the US is CO2. And the majority of that is actually from fossil fuel combustion, not from food production, which is what we're talking about today. But when you look at, the transport of food and the removal of forest or other, repurposing of land to become farmland or to be used for agriculture, that all kind of plays back into, the other stuff. So while directly it's not as food production doesn't cause as much CO2 as the other two gases, indirectly, those other things definitely have a cost. And I was actually surprised to learn the website said in the US since 1990, the management of forests and other land has actually acted as a net sink of CO2 in the US, which means that more CO2 is removed from the atmosphere and stored in the plants and trees than is emitted, which is kind of, good, promising. That wasn't a statistic I had heard before. You always just hear about the bad, but globally, that's not the case. So looking at methane, 10% in the US of greenhouse gases is methane, and about 60% globally, methane emissions come from human activities like industry, agriculture, and waste management. And the majority of that is agriculture. So when you hear, eating less meat or going vegetarian is a great way to reduce your carbon footprint or your, go greener. That's what they mean. It's actually helping to reduce not just carbon, but methane and all these other potent gases. In the U.S., natural gas and petroleum is the largest source of that, but globally, it's agriculture. And methane lasts in the atmosphere a shorter amount of time than CO2, but it's more efficient at trapping the radiation that causes, global warming. So it's actually 25 times greater impact than carbon dioxide over a 100-year period, and that's kind of a lot. That's a big deal. And then the last one we talked about, nitrous oxide, 6% of greenhouse gases in the U.S. From human activity, but about 40% come from humans globally, and that's again agriculture and transport and other industry activities. So in the U.S., agriculture soil management is the largest source of NOx emissions, and that's about 77% as of 2016. So again, the molecules for these stay in the atmosphere longer, about 114 years, and then, they start to break down or get absorbed. But it's about 300 times more impactful than 1 pound of carbon dioxide. So anything you can do to reduce emissions at any stage of food production is a big deal, but especially those last two that we don't talk about as much because they're, CO2 gets all the cred.
Well, a couple things came to mind when you were talking. So you mentioned like going vegetarian or vegan, and that's kind of how this is relatable to the average person. If you want to try to make a difference, there's Meatless Monday, if that's just how you want to get started, baby steps. Or you can watch some documentaries, which will totally freak you out and not want to eat meat for a long time.
Make you cry.
Yeah, I watched Food Inc. and Forks Over Knives, and then like when you're on Netflix, it just keeps recommending like more and more and more, and before you know it, you've spiraled out of control. But that is something I wanted to touch on is, even if all this climate change talk or, greenhouse gas emissions conversation doesn't really engage you, seeing the images of how animals are treated and, what we have to do in order to feed the masses this amount of protein, it makes you rethink, well, maybe I can have some chickpeas or, a protein powder that's not animal based, whey protein or something like that. So I've been doing a lot of research into like the protein powders that taste good that are based off of pea protein or hemp protein. Cause the milk tastes better, right? Like the whey protein powder tastes better. But again, this is just kind of making it relatable to someone who doesn't really know like where to get started. It's just kind of substituting maybe instead of having sausage or bacon for breakfast, like you could just have a smoothie with protein powder in it, or oatmeal with some peanut butter. So a lot of people are always freaked out. Yeah. A lot of people get freaked out because they're just like, where are you going to get your protein? Like, how do vegans, survive? And, there's like pro football players that are vegan and they're very muscular. So anyways, that was my 2 cents on production and understanding all that.
It's a great point because I know we're focusing more on like the environmental impacts, but a lot of people are vegetarian and vegan for the animal cruelty aspect, and that's absolutely a valid reason as well. And I mean, that's probably the more traditional reason that people choose those diets. So
I had a coworker the other day who mentioned that she has cows on her estate or something, like her children help raise these cows, and she has to keep telling her kids like, oh, that hamburger comes from HEB. Like she can't bring herself to tell them that it comes from these cows that are
there was ran away.
I mean, it made me like smile, but at the same time, I'm like, this is how everyone lives for the most part. Like they have no clue where their food comes from. Like if I physically couldn't go in the backyard and wring a chicken's neck and cut its head off and defeather it to put it on the table for my family to eat, then I'm just like, I shouldn't be eating chicken. Like if I physically couldn't bring myself to do it, like, I mean, there are people out there that don't even care. Like this is how they live, this is how they survive, and it's not that they don't care, it's just the reality of their existence. Like you have to survive off of the land. But most of us are not in that situation anymore. We can go to multiple grocery stores that have all different varieties. We're not in survival mode anymore. Like we're not hunter and gatherers. So you don't have to eat meat all the time to live.
There was this one, he was a documentarian and kind of a survivalist. So when he was at home in his regular surroundings, he was vegan. Him and his partner were vegan. But when he would go on these expeditions and do these documentaries, it was just him and his tripod. So he was out in the middle of nowhere with nobody around, and he would eat meat. But he would catch it himself. He would do whatever defeathering and degutting you have to do. But that was the only time he ever do it because he needed it to survive, because it was basically just him, the clothes he had on his back, and some survival gear, and that was it. So with that kind of thing, if you're living off your land, then that's, I feel like your right to do so. But going into a supermarket and seeing rows and rows and rows of just meat, you get detached and it doesn't resonate at all.
Yeah, I really think people need to watch like these documentaries like once a month to just like constantly remind yourself, because you forget. Like it's been years since I've seen those movies, and I'm just like constantly, you get desensitized, like you mentioned before. And right after you watch one of those documentaries and you have those visual images like fresh in your head, the minute you start walking down the aisle at the grocery store and you hit like the meat and the chicken, you're like, whoa, like run for your life. I don't know. I couldn't do it. So I went to the grocery store on Sunday, and I like didn't buy any protein, like meat protein at all. Like I literally was looking at it and I was like, all I can see is gas chambers and slaughterhouses and like cows and pigs like basically crying. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do it. But
Jen's in the corner of the grocery store crying.
Yeah. But I did buy a lot of really yummy, like new ingredients. So it got me to change, you're used to buying like the same stuff over and over again, like
you do get in the rut.
It forced me to like try different grocery stores, try different ingredients, look up different recipes. I have a ton of like vegan and vegetarian cookbooks that I'm trying to pull out, and just try different things. And my husband's actually getting on board, and I thought that would never happen. Like he's from Texas, born and raised. And
have you tricked him yet and been like, here, try this pie, and not told him that it was like vegan or? made with beans or something?
No. He's on board though. Like he's actually, I think baby steps for him is like we're gonna just try like pescatarian dishes when we do eat meat. Um, just make sure it's not like farm raised. You want to make sure, and if it is farm raised, that it's sustainably farm raised. There's a lot of like if you go to Whole Foods, it's just hard for a lot of people, but they have a listing of where it came from and if it's been harvested sustainably or not. And they have like a rating system for all of their meats: chicken, beef, seafood. So that makes it really easy for the consumer to understand. If you go to natural grocers, they like already do all that work for you. Like the stuff doesn't even exist in their store if it's been like produced in a way that's not humane or unsustainable. Like they took a certain like ice cream off of their shelves, and my husband and I were like, where did it go? This was the best ice cream ever. And they were like, oh, we just created this new policy where we're not going to have any dairy products where the cows are, stuck in those cages and they're just constantly producing milk and they're being pumped full of hormones. So it's just good to know that it takes like the guessing game out of your shopping experience, because you can go to a store like Natural Grocers and they've already kind of like done that for you. Like you can just buy what you need and get out the door instead of having to like stare at everything and research it on your own time.
Yeah, it's really great now that we have the options to, they kind of dumb it down for us, but that's what we need. I think a lot of people that don't have time or energy to research it, just let me know that everything in this store or on this aisle is, sustainable, blah, 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 and that's where I'll go. This reminds me, have you guys watched Portlandia?
Yeah.
The very first episode where, this couple's eating at a restaurant and they ask, can you tell me more about the chicken? And the waitress brings a book over and she's like, this is Colin. And it's a picture of the He's raised on a diet of blah, 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 blah. And they start asking all these ridiculous questions. And they're like, well, he's at a farm, he was at a farm down the street. And they're like, you know what, we're just going to go check it out. And they go like to the farm. They say, hold our seats. And they end up like joining a cult at the farm, staying for 5 years, and then coming back and their seat's still available, of course. But like, it's the most ridiculous but funny, food source experience ever.
I watched that episode. I was dying laughing. They're just like, well, was he happy when he died? Like, did he have a good death?
What were his sleeping conditions and what were his friends like? Oh, it's great. Yeah. But there are people that go that far, so.
I feel like now that we've been eating plant-based for almost 6 months, that would be me. I'd have to go and make sure that everything's okay. And I probably wouldn't even, I couldn't eat it. No, now I've seen the face. I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely feel like that right now. Like I'm just being a lot more cautious of what I'm buying and what I feel like I want to put in my body to like energize me. You don't feel good after you've eaten a big greasy burger. Like you feel gross and you just want to curl in a ball. Yeah.
I just want to say that we're very lucky to be able to talk about this, that we can choose and that we're privileged enough to be able to say yes and no and to foods that we don't want to eat and choose not to eat. I know there's a lot of talk that I've heard on the Instagrams that I follow about just acknowledging that the privilege and the ability that we have to make these choices, and that for a lot of people this isn't part of their everyday, that they're stuck with what's ever available to them for the price range that it's available. Because I know growing up, we couldn't afford the healthy food. We couldn't afford name brand anything, and going to a natural grocer was completely out of the question. It was either we're eating this, kids, or the hydro goes off. Which one do you want to do? So yeah, we're very lucky to be able to talk about it like this.
Ramen and Hamburger Helper, I think.
Yeah, Hamburger Helper. Yep. A lot of craft dinner.
That actually makes me think about the price per like gram of protein. So instead of paying for, I don't know, let's say you're a hamburger helper, like the protein you're going to buy is like $5 or something. The amount of stuff you could buy that's the same amount of protein is actually a lot cheaper. Like you can buy a bag of beans for like $1 and it has just as much protein in it as like that pound of beef that you're going to buy. So, yeah, I just wanted to be like considerate of your comment as well. It's just, I think people seem to think they have to go to fast food because it's cheap and,
and sometimes that's the only place they can go to though too. I didn't know about food deserts till I think last year. I had no idea those existed, and I just kind of blew my mind because I've grown up and lived in agricultural town Ontario my whole life. So to know that there are places that just is not a possibility kind of blew my mind.
What's a food desert, Chris, for our listeners?
Food desert is an area, usually in urban places, where there is no fresh produce. Everything's canned, preserved, convenience foods. And the only places you actually can go to eat are convenience stores or buying your food from a Burger King or McDonald's because it's actually cheaper to eat it that way because the infrastructure for grocers is not there.
But don't we have like public transportation where they can go to like a grocery store? I don't know if I'm being ignorant on the situation, but
I think it depends on the city because like here in Columbia, we have the Hop with very limited lines and very, the routes are not always great or they don't run very often. So I think it depends on that and your work schedule and you can afford to go. I think the key thing with food deserts though is that you have to it's in your neighborhood or it's walkable, right? It's close enough that you don't have to take a car. If you have to drive, then it's which that's hard for a lot of people. Yeah. Cities have good public transit, but smaller towns or places like this, mid-sized, don't always. So. Yeah.
We have none where we are. We have none. You have to drive everywhere.
You have horses and no.
Well, actually, there is big Mennonite community here, big Amish community. So there's a lot of horses.
Oh, cool.
I think we're going to have Michelle on the next episode who's going to talk about composting, but she's also really good at planting, like growing your own food. And so I know if you live in an apartment, like there's ways of building like vertical gardens in your little like patio that you might have in your apartment. So that might be the solution to the problem is it's very, very cheap to buy a seed and plant it in a potted plant on your patio if you don't have a backyard and that kind of thing.
Also education, just educating people like in public schools, just get it in from the get-go that this is part of like part of your curriculum, I think would be a pretty good way to ingrain it because I mean, we didn't grow up learning any of that. No life skills, just Pythagorean theorem.
Kind of pulled a lot of the basic home skills out of school. Jen, your comment made me think of, other creative ways people can kind of grow their own food or get access to fresh food if they don't have something they can buy it someplace they can buy it. A lot of places are starting community gardens now, and if you don't have one in your community, you might consider doing that yourself. They're really great. You just find a plot of land or make a raised bed, and whoever wants to plant or take from it has to contribute so many hours or has to maintain their little plot. That's a really cool way. And there's also organizations out there that are pushing for more front yard gardens. So there used to be a lot of those back in the day. And I know in Austin, the Green Corn Harvest, I think is the name, or Blue Corn Harvest or something. It's a nonprofit that specifically tries to get more gardens in cities and older neighborhoods or, poor neighborhoods. So there's a lot of great organizations out there if you're interested. Just, look stuff up.
Yeah, it's almost like worrying about climate change is kind of like first world problems, right? Like the majority of people that are struggling to just pay the bills, like climate change and worrying about these types of things doesn't always take priority. And so
Yeah.
I think it's important for us to acknowledge, like, I'm glad that you made this comment because it's getting me to think like in a different mindset right now, that although these major global issues may not be something that, you know, is of main concern for the majority of the population or even the world population, because they're just trying to survive and get clean water. I think that what they could take away from these conversations is that it actually does save you money by doing things differently sometimes. So if you add up, you know, how much money you're spending going to Taco Bell or McDonald's or, you know, those convenience foods, you actually can save a lot more money. And any of these topics we've had on any of these podcasts, all of them have a similar thread, which is if you do things that are more sustainable for the planet and for your family, it actually does save you money. So even though we're all in different like socioeconomic stages and stuff, it's important to know that we're not just kind of like these girls on this podcast trying to be like, save the world, everybody.
You can do it.
You know, it's more like this is the take home is doing these things helps. Yes, it helps everyone. It helps the planet, but it also helps you.
Yeah. And the underlying message is things like minimalism, things like sustainability. It help the bottom line. It's not some radical way of living and trying to be a jerk about things. It does save you a lot of money, and the great byproduct of that is that you're helping the environment. My sister was like, she's like, Chris, you'll be proud of me. We don't use the dryer anymore during the day. We like all these things. She shuts lights off now and stuff like that because they were trying to save money on their electrical and gas bill. And I didn't, I wasn't going to be like, and you're saving the environment too. But she was so happy that her hydro bill and her gas bill went down by like $100 that month that she keeps it up now. That's awesome. Yeah, but she does. It's not because of the environment. It's because of the money that they're saving. So if that's the motivation, then that's great.
Yeah. That's definitely a great point. We have to be cognizant of everyone's coming from a different experience, and it may not be the top priority, but definitely economics is in our favor on this stuff. So
yeah.
And unfortunately, the people affected the most by climate change are the poorest or the most,
the people who can't do anything about it.
The ones that are just trying to survive. And that is, we're causing it, and third world countries are, taking the brunt of the consequences. So, yeah. Well, let's see. What else do we want to talk about? We've touched on kind of a lot, and I know everyone kind of researched some for this show, but we're just kind of throwing out, different things that come to mind. I have an interesting thread so I made a post today on social media and asked, what do you think is the biggest consequence or one of them of our food production system? And someone commented, overcoming resistance to GMOs, because so this is going to be kind of a controversial topic probably, but because there's a big debate out there. Are GMOs bad for us? Are they, should we be banning them or should we be embracing them? And science actually tells us that we need GMOs to feed a growing population. But there are also some studies that show there could be health side effects to a lot of the things that we do to our food. So I thought that was an interesting comment because I hadn't even thought of that. But really, the way we grow food is so heavily influenced by those practices. And I'm interested to hear what you guys think about that.
Personally, I'm kind of against GMOs. And by kind of, I mean, like, I really don't like them. I just don't think you should mess with nature like that. Like, it concerns me that we're genetically modifying a seed so that it can become resistant to Roundup that we spray all over our crops to keep it from, being depleted by some sort of insect or fungus, which I understand. Like, yeah, we have to feed people, and this is the reality that we live in. Like, we're already overpopulated as a world, and so this is just kind of like what we have to do. But I don't know. I think I just go back to like grow your own food. Like, if everyone just had like some pots outside wherever they live, get some sunshine and some water on it, and like that's really it. Like, I don't know. I can't support the GMO, even though I know there is a lot of debate going back and forth about it. I just think that your body maybe isn't like gonna do well with that over the long term. I think there's things like cancers that can be linked with a lot of these pesticides and things that are being sprayed on our food. And then, yeah, the GMO side of things as well. Like, maybe your body just can't identify what it is at some point and can't digest it properly. We're all going to be full of inflammation.
Walking bodies of information.
A lot of the foods we already eat are genetically modified in some way, and we don't realize it. Like, we probably wouldn't recognize corn and bananas and a lot of fruits and veggies that we eat today from what they came from. So I know that a lot of us have been eating that stuff our whole lives and not even realizing it, but it's really come to the forefront in the last few years. And, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence because I see the science behind it and I see the need for it, but I also know that we wouldn't need it if we didn't, like you said, use pesticides, herbicides, all the asides.
Yeah. Well, I'm on the fence
too. Part of the problem is that we've gone to these mass production farms. Like, it never used to be like this. I'm not never, but before Industrial Revolution and all that. I mean, everyone had a farm. We all had to survive that way, or you just did hunting and gathering and you were like a nomad or something. But yeah, I guess when we started creating these mass farms, we lost control of our food and how it's created. And I don't want to be eating pesticides. I mean, it's covered in all these foods. So even when you buy organic, like, you don't know how close the organic field was to the non-organic field, and you get overspray and groundwater that spreads to it, even though they're doing their best to not, actually spray it with these chemicals. But yeah, I mean, I think I've mentioned it before. I try to buy organic as much as possible, which it is a little bit more expensive, but if that means I don't get cancer someday, then I think it's worth it. Or I grow my own food. If I can.
There's a really great docuseries on Netflix called Rotten, and it's, I think, about 6 episodes. Wait a minute, what is it? 6 episodes, yes. So in it talks about how the food industry's kind of gotten away from the consumer and the sort of mob-like antics that go on behind the scenes. There's one about fisheries, peanuts, garlic. The garlic one threw me because China's involved on that one, and that was it's like espionage type stuff. Honey, chicken, milk, specifically raw milk, and the laws. And this is all United States information. It's a United States docuseries. So the milk one, the raw milk, the laws, I guess there's 11 states that allow raw milk, and all of that, and the benefits and whatever. And yeah, and then cod and the quotas, and how one guy kind of bought up all the quotas, and now these people have lost their livelihood because they're trying to make it a free market, but it kind of didn't work out. But it's a really great series, and it's very compelling to watch how, you take for granted buying a jar of honey off the shelf, not realizing that there's this massive industry behind it, and a lot of shady crap goes down.
There's like sugar in it instead of like actual honey.
It's not even honey.
Like
Yeah. And it's
corn.
like
It's just corn syrup
corn
that's been
syrup.
dyed. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's something like there's no way that the honeybees we have on the planet can actually produce the amount of honey that's being bought and consumed, something like that.
Yeah, you have to really like read the ingredient lists on everything if you're buying like packaged foods of any sort.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back to GMOs really quick. I think like the original debate about, we don't have enough land and we wouldn't be able to create enough food unless we had GMOs. The reality is the system is broken. Like 31% of just tomatoes, 31% of just tomatoes that are purchased that end up in your house get thrown away.
Yeah.
That doesn't even include all the ones that don't get purchased and get thrown away at the grocery store, or the ones that, don't make it to the grocery store because they're not the right size or whatever. So as an industry, this is all from the EPA website. So $2.3 billion is wasted just on tomatoes. And overall, $166 billion is food waste. It's all food waste that just gets like produced and thrown away. And that's all money that's being like subsidized to farmers so that they can continue their lifestyle. So just kind of like let that sink in. Like if we're creating all this, land, and we're using all this water to create all this food, like there's plenty of food.
Yeah,
we don't need
more than enough.
GMOs. We're just, the way that we're doing things isn't going to work. And so they're trying to use GMOs as a reason to, say we need to have them, and we really don't. And it's just like some big conspiracy theory for Roundup.
Yeah. Well, I read something. There's a really great term that I found called, what's it called? Oh, where is it? I wrote it down. It's like camera cuisine. So it's the idea that, because there are a lot of regulations and a lot of specifications that food produce has to go through before it even reaches the grocer, right? And if something doesn't pass, then it's just left in the field to rot. And I'm sure it's heartbreaking for the farmer who spent a lot of time and energy to grow all of that. And, 31% of it just goes to crap because it didn't meet the beauty specifications of the grocer. And in turn with us as the consumers, we've never seen a wonky looking tomato or banana or whatever. And so we don't know that if we see something like that, that it's okay to eat, right? We just assume it's this lovely, round, plump, red looking thing when they take on many shapes and forms. And we've just sort of been kind of blindfolded as to what it is. So
the food waste problem in this country and the world probably is out of control. But there are some organizations that are, trying to either minimize the amount of ugly produce or find uses for it. So there's a company called Imperfect Produce that actually takes all the ugly stuff, and you can subscribe and they'll send you a box. And unfortunately, they aren't here where I live, but I've been on their waiting list for a while. But I know that things like that are popping up all over. And there's also some, restaurants and juice bars and stuff like that will take, either the discarded stuff that's not pretty enough for the shelves, or the stuff that's left over after they do whatever to it. So sometimes you can only use a certain part of a plant, but the rest of it's perfectly fine. They just don't get used. So there are, some people doing some things in that area. We definitely need more of that. And we definitely need to lower our standards for picture perfect produce, like you said, because it tastes the same. It just, I've gotten stuff from people's gardens that look a little funny, but taste just fine.
I like the pictures of the carrots, all the different types of carrots and stuff, and they're like, some of them look like their legs are crossed and stuff.
Oh yeah,
cute.
Yeah.
Dainty
so I think there is a food co-op that can deliver to your door in y'all's area in Killeen, and I think they probably exist in most major areas. So That's an option. And if you don't know of one, a good place to go is any local farmers market. You can talk to the farmers. If one doesn't exist, you could probably get one created with some of your neighbors. But that, again, back to the original conversation about greenhouse gases, I think that buying local, supporting farmers locally, growing your own food, I mean, that's how we're going to solve a lot of these issues, is figuring out how to, maybe not always support the major grocery stores or Walmarts of the world, and, maybe start taking control of your own food that you put in your body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And not only are there environmental consequences to that, to not buying local, but you're supporting your local economy. And, that in itself is a huge thing if you're not inspired by the environmental stuff. But also, there are a lot of health benefits to buying stuff that's grown in your region. You hear a lot about local honey helps you build up immunities to different allergies, local allergies. But I would think the same goes for the food that you eat, because it's produced near where you live. And the benefits are just endless to buying local. And also then it's fresher, right? So you don't need the preservatives, and you don't need the wax on the apples and all this stuff. You guys used to do that, like scratch the wax off the apples when you were a kid? It's so gross.
So I wanted to try to make... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, here in Canada, bananas have surpassed local apples in popularity here. So, because they're cheaper, even though they get shipped from tropical zones up to our frigid wasteland up here. Yeah, and that's a problem too, is because the bananas are I think it's 88 cents a pound, but local apples are $1. I think I bought some today for $1.27 a pound. So, which sucks. That totally sucks.
Yeah.
But that's how broken the food system is.
Well, I have some more statistics if that interests anyone, but basically 40% of food that is grown and produced, as far as produce is concerned, is wasted and thrown out. And the majority of that, in fact, 1/3 of all food produced is thrown into landfills. Mm-hmm. So just keep that in mind. And I guess the take home, again, is to just plan a little bit better, shop a little bit smarter, think ahead when you're, making your grocery list or your food prepping, and just make sure it's food that you really want to eat. I know sometimes I'll prepare a massive bowl of soup and it's just me and my husband, and after day 5 he's like, no more soup. So I give it to coworkers, you know what I mean, you can give it to friends and neighbors and share and stuff like that. So but yeah, I know we're all kind of guilty of letting the food maybe get bad. Unfortunately, sometimes it gets wasted in your home. So the way to get around that is try things like Sunbasket, or what's the HelloFresh, or if you don't have time and you have the money to spend on it, those services actually don't, allows you to not waste any of your food, I guess, because it just shows up in the exact amount that you need, so that you're not wasting half of an onion or whatever. So That's just a thought I throw out there. So if you can just plan ahead and do your best job at not wasting the food, then maybe we can help solve some of these problems.
Yep, definitely. Food waste in the house is probably just, it's out of control. I know in most households and restaurants. God, restaurants are the worst. Mm-hmm. Oh, I've worked in one, and yeah, it made me sick, the amount of stuff we threw out.
Yeah, again, because it's oh, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say, one thing that's been helping me is sometimes my coworkers will be like, oh, let's go out to eat, and I'm like, oh, I already have my lunch planned, I brought it and it's in the fridge and I'm going to eat it. But, every once in a while you kind of get pulled in and you want to, go out with your coworkers. And So I've just been kind of planning to have smoothies for lunches now, because it's all like frozen. Like the fruits and vegetables are already frozen, and the protein powder, stays in the refrigerator. So nothing's really like getting wasted or not, getting consumed, and it can just stay preserved in a way. So, and it's healthier. So that's just an option if people are trying to like figure out how to navigate this.
There's also a great documentary out. It was actually the last one that Anthony Bourdain did, called Wasted. And it looks at food waste around the world and a lot of the stuff we've talked about, like, ugly produce and just how much people throw away. But it also talks about like meat and the parts of animals that aren't traditionally eaten and just get discarded. And it really grossed me out to see some of the things they were eating, because I just can't do that. But I definitely give them kudos for not wasting any part of those animals. So it's a really good watch if you're interested in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that man would eat anything. That's for sure.
Sure would.
Yeah.
What else do you guys want to talk about with relation to the food system and just?
I was just going to throw out there a segue into our next episode is composting of food waste. If you actually, do grow your own food or you just have food waste, composting at your home is always an option, because not a lot of cities offer compost curbside collection. So Michelle's going to talk to us about her composting program in the clean area. And she basically goes door to door and collects buckets of food waste and brings them to a local farm. So you'll get to hear about that next. But if you're not in that area and you're just at your own home, you can compost just using some simple, wire. You can throw in some leaves, grass clippings, and those types of things. So we'll go into more detail on composting in the next episode. So just stay tuned for that.
Absolutely. It's not as intimidating as it sounds. I've been doing it for a few years and I'm not the best at it, but I mean, if you have a little bit of land, you just throw stuff on it in a pile. Awesome. Anything else you guys want to touch on that we didn't already discuss?
There's two documentaries that I found. One's Canadian and one's from the US. The one from Canada is called Just Eat It, and it's from 2014. It's a Canadian couple. They're filmmakers, and they're based in British Columbia, Vancouver. And just so it's sort of specific to that province, but they do a year-long experiment of foraging. They do some dumpster diving. They go to grocery stores and ask what if there's any produce or things that are going to be culled, and things like that. And the gentleman in it, he wound up gaining like over 10 pounds because he'd see these tubs of yogurt that were in the dumpster that were perfectly good. So he'd take home like 5 or 6 of them because he was just like, oh, it's going to waste. But he was eating unfortunately, he was eating a lot of processed food during this documentary, but he just seeing the amount of waste was just, he gained a lot of weight. And then the other one is called Sustainable. It's from 2016. I believe it's on Netflix. I haven't seen this one, but I do know it is about food waste and the food production system.
You said the first one was called Just Eat It?
Just Eat It, yeah. And they're a really cute couple. They did another one in 2010 on 2012 on zero waste. They did a year long.
Not to be confused with Weird Al's hit, Just Eat It.
No. Weird Al did not. Yeah, Weird Al did not have anything to do with this documentary.
Didn't appear in that documentary. The only other things I was going to touch on that we sort of skirted around, but didn't delve into, is the resources that get affected by the way we grow our food. So waterways that get contaminated or get really abused because they, get diverted or sucked dry in order to overwater these crops that shouldn't be growing in certain areas, and then just runoff from the chemicals, in the ground that are supposedly needed to grow these plants. So those are huge issues, and those are things that directly affect people's health. And you can't drink the water if it's contaminated, or you can't, grow in land that's been over fertilized for so long or whatever. And then the other thing I was going to touch on was just, deforestation to grow more plants is a huge issue. And specifically in a lot of, developing countries, they'll just clear cut some forests, some rainforest in order to grow more of whatever. And not only does that, remove those carbon sinks, but also just depletes the natural resources and ecosystems of the animals that live there. So those are all things, to keep in mind when you hear about, these things grown all over the world. And yeah, we want a variety of foods, but we want to be smart about, what we're growing where, and do we need to be growing something in that region that isn't native to there, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I read that it's like 25% of the fresh water that's used in the world gets wasted with all of this food waste. So basically we calculated, how much water it took to grow all of the food, right? And then a certain amount of that food gets thrown away. So it's like all that water that was used to grow that food is actually now just like kind of a waste, even though it goes, back into the water cycle in a way. That's still fresh water that could have been, consumed by humans that maybe have issues with getting fresh water.
Fresh water is not a completely infinitely renewable resource. I mean, we're using it up faster than we can really replenish it, especially when you think about how we're polluting the air and, it's getting contaminated with salt water and all that. So wasting water is a really bad thing.
I know in Texas, there's a lot of agriculture that's based off of wells. So they have to dig into the aquifers, into the ground. And so they're basically depleting the fresh water source for human consumption by, trying to keep all these plants, and grow all these plants that actually end up just kind of getting wasted. So yeah, we have a lot of problems in this world, ladies, and I don't know if we're going to solve it all tonight. But I think just awareness and education is what this is all about, right?
Yeah.
This is why I feel extreme guilt when I see food wasted. Or I was at an event the other night and I took home 4 giant pans of food because I was like, I can't let that go in the trash. And now I have to eat it all like the guy with the yogurt containers or freeze it.
Bring it to work. Feed your coworkers.
I did. The thing is, they don't eat it. We get so much food at my job and it just sits in the fridge all week and then gets tossed at the end of the week if I don't, continuously either remind people or guilt them into taking it.
I was always the person that would pull the food out, put it on, a plate or a napkin and hand it to them. I would walk around the office and be like, eat this. Here's your lunch. I was the waitress of the office. It's the only way to get him to get out of your chair.
They'd be crying.
I know. Well, because even if I took it out of the fridge and put it on the table, people never even make their way into the kitchen for the whole day. So I'm just do. Here, have some banana. I'd hand out fruits and vegetables.
Ray has the opposite problem at his work. We call them the vultures because he'll set something down on the break room table and it's gone by the time he comes back. It's gone. People are vultures.
That's funny. That's true. I guess it depends on where you work because my husband works at the hospital and Scott and White in Temple, and he's just everyone has to put their name and date. And if you don't, someone will steal it or they'll get thrown away if you forget about it.
Yeah, that's his at work because there's vultures. That's where all our Halloween candy that we don't like goes.
So many people have I don't know, this violent opposition to eating leftovers though. They're just nope.
I used to.
And I'm like, you know what? I force myself to, and I may hate it the second time around, but my guilt, I can't
I
not
used
eat
to.
it.
I grew up with a mom who thought it was disgusting. For as poor as we were, she wouldn't eat
Oh.
leftovers, and yeah, I wouldn't eat leftovers for the longest time. But since we started eating plant-based, it's like, nope. Guess what? Sunday night's leftover night, everybody. We're just gonna eat the rest of this chili and the soup and whatever freaking patty I made. This is what's for dinner.
Yeah. I guess that's just how we, like, some people were raised, you
Yeah.
know, differently. But I'm like, when did I cook this? Sunday?
Yeah.
That was like 6 days ago. It should be good.
It's fine. It's fine.
I go by the 1 week rule usually. Like,
I just smell it.
I try to eat it within a week, and yeah, then I smell
You
it.
smell
and
it. Do the mold
If it
check.
smells like it's turned, then that's the bad sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my husband pulled
My
out
milk
like some
sits in
cubes
the
of.
fridge way too
He
long.
pulled out some cubes of cheese the other day, and I was like, I think there's like some furry white like fungus growing on there.
Did
And
he
he's
cut
like,
it off?
He's like, it's cheese, like it's fine. He just like brushed it off.
Yeah.
He's like,
Cheese
it is
fungus.
It was hilarious.
Yeah, I've had things that I'm like, this is definitely growing penicillin, not you.
Yeah.
But
You
cheese
can-
you can usually cut around.
Yeah. I left what did I do? I left some bread at the back of the bread box in our pantry and I forgot about it, and then I cleaned things out and I'm like, this is hot. Like, this is heat to it. I have to throw it. No, that's not good. Compost bin it goes. It'd been there for a while.
There's some things that get so rancid that I'm like, I'm not even going to try to take you out of the bag to clean the bag because I feel like it's toxic. And that kills me that if it's a plastic or, but yeah, that's when you know it's bad.
Well, I know we might be running low on time, but I wanted to throw out there's some like websites you can go to on how to preserve your food a little bit better. Like there's certain things that like produce, especially, I know we all buy like berries and then it's like, before you know it, it's day 2 and there's mold all over them or something. Like there's things you can do to prepare and store your produce in the refrigerator properly so that it lasts longer. It's not just like keeping it in that plastic bag if you have all those and kind of like throwing it in the crisper drawer of your fridge. So just like Google that and that might help like keep some of your food last longer. Like I know like for example like cilantro, parsley, you can kind of like cut the stems a little bit and like put them in a glass of water in the refrigerator and that'll help them stay alive a lot longer.
That works for broccoli as well. Put the broccoli in there and carrots.
And some of those foods you can actually grow new ones from the scraps, like carrots and onions. I've done it with green onions, which is kind of cool.
Celery.
Yeah, I don't eat celery, but
I don't like either. I've just seen it.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So hopefully the stuff we've talked about has been helpful, and we don't want to be all doom and gloom, but we do want to impress the importance of the issues and just kind of give you an idea of why when people say, don't waste your food or don't buy this or that or look for certain things, why we say that, because there usually is a very good environmental reason for that. So let's move on to our green life hacks. I'm super excited about mine. So I've actually had this for a few months. It was a Christmas present from Stefan's wife. So I'm a little bummed that he can't see this, but he and his wife. But this is our first officially logoed item. If you guys can't see, it's a bamboo cutting board with the Sustainably Geeky logo on it. And so, yeah, I've been sitting on this since Christmas.
That's amazing.
Since this is our food episode, I thought it was the perfect one to bust it out. So it's bamboo.
Cool.
Wasn't it great?
I'm kind of jealous. Like, why didn't you
get one? I want one. That's awesome.
Because she's, my friend, and she thought, what can I get her? And she ended up she's the sweetest person ever. They asked for the logo, and I thought something was up, but then she gave all of us cutting boards, a group of us, and this had my logo on it, and I was just so touched. So I'm not even using it right now. It's just for display. But yeah, it's our first logoed item, and it's bamboo, so it's renewable, sustainable. And bamboo is, great for a ton of things. But yeah, I thought you guys would like that. So who wants to go next?
I'll go. Okay, so this is my I don't know. Instead of buying cellophane or like cling wrap, which just gets thrown away, these are just like little lids that are dishwasher safe and microwave safe. The brand, I mean, I'm sure there's tons out there, but this is just called Mod Family. And they come in all different sizes. So whenever I like don't have a lid to something, like you're going to a party and you've got like your vegetable platter, you know, like everybody kind of shows up with like it all pretty and it's covered in cellophane. So yeah, I use these instead. So this is my hack that I will share with you. And I think I bought these on Amazon or something and they're super cheap. But yeah, there was like 10 of them and they're all like big to small, like different sizes. That's all I got. Oh, cool. One more. So instead of buying, like, you know, you can buy like salt, pepper, different herbs and stuff like at the grocery store that are in like those glass or plastic little like shakers. I just go to the bulk section and I bring these with me whenever these are empty. This is my turmeric. And we've talked about this before with my mason jars with like the nuts and seeds and stuff, but this is for like, I use these for my different herbs and whatnot. So yeah, I have a bunch of all of these all in the kitchen instead of like just constantly buying those like pre-packaged ones.
It's cheaper too to buy them that way. Way cheaper.
So much cheaper.
So
yes.
I bought salt today for 23 cents. 23 cents. Yes, it's gonna last us for a while too. Way cheaper to buy them in bulk than in those glass jar thingies.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, my green hack. Okay, so I don't have it. It's what Jennifer was saying. Making shopping lists, grocery shopping lists. If you make a list, you are more likely to stick to it. And menu planning. I personally have to confess, I really like grocery shopping. I don't like shopping for anything else. Just really like grocery shopping. So for me, it's fun. I like making my grocery list. I will go to 8 different stores if I have to. It's a fun thing for me to do, which says a lot about me as a person. So menu planning and shopping lists will help you avoid a good chunk of your food waste because you're not impulse buying and normally, and you're only getting what you need. Because I used to be very bad at being like, oh, I'll eat that. Yeah, I'm going to buy that. And then it would go bad and I would have to throw it out. So menu planning and shopping lists are my green hack.
Yay.
A lot of great apps too.
I've been using Shipped a lot because I don't know, I've just been feeling like overwhelmed at the grocery store. So I'm like the opposite of you at this moment in time. Like I just like, I don't know if it's because I'm in like a major city and it's just like there's just all these people and all these cars and it's such a traffic like situation. So I find I'm spending a lot less money because I'm not like impulse buying, you know, like, oh, I'm walking by the chocolate and I need chocolate. Like I'm just like buying the ingredients that I need, you know, on whatever you use. Like there's all kinds of these services now, but ours is like Shipped. And so I can just do that and I'm not, you know, wasting money and time.
Awesome. Well, where can we find you online, Chris?
On Instagram at Cedar Birch Cottage, here at Sustainably Geeky, Marginally Geeky, and our big one, Epically Geeky.
Woohoo! Jen, where can we find you online? If at all.
I'm kind of, I'm MIA. I don't know where you can find me.
Here.
Well, Sustainably Geeky is your exclusive look.
Yes.
You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Het's Gonna Be Me. Of course, here on Sustainably Geeky. And like Chris said, on the Marginally Geeky and Epically Geeky shows, which is our parent company. And we are also, the show itself has a Facebook page, Sustainably Geeky. We're on the Epically Geeky YouTube, and we also are on Stitcher, and iTunes, and Google Play. So if you prefer to listen, that's where you can find us. Please subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, and Tell all your friends. Definitely interact with us. We love it when people comment and send us messages. So send us your ideas and suggestions. And we will see you next month where we're going to talk about composting. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.